Welcome back to another season of the Levin podcast. Today's topic is middle neighborhoods. I am Kristen Blazek, and with me always is Molly. Welcome back, Molly.
Thank you. Glad to be here with you.
And today we're bringing back a guest. I think this is the second time that we've brought back a guest, but it's our very first guest from our podcast talking about something other than himself. Is the Dean of the Levin College of Urban Affairs, Maxine Goodman Levin College of Urban Affairs, and that is Dean Anglin. Welcome back.
Well, thank you, Kristen. I'm wondering if I talk about myself too much, but...
No, you have a great story, so I would preference everybody to going back and watching the story from the Dean. There are some things that I wanted to mention that we talked about off camera right after that was like your favorite interesting food of all time. I think we stopped recording and you mentioned your favorite food experience. And so could we start with what your favorite food experience is?
Well, sure. It was about 10 years ago. I was traveling with a group of scholars, urban scholars in Latin America, and we ended up in Mexico City. And our host in Mexico City took us to a very nice restaurant. And the menus came out, and on the menu was a group of insects, from grasshoppers to you name it. And so all of us were sitting there as Americans saying, who's going to try this first? And it just got to be so tense-filled. I said, let me try it. And it tasted extremely well. I love the taste of it. And I would do it again. So that's my favorite alternative taste treat.
Awesome. Yes, I loved that story. So I wanted everyone else to experience it as well.
Yes. I favor anacrids.
Yes. Was there a favorite among the bunch?
The locusts are really crunchy.
That's good.
But they cooked them up in nice sauce. So it was really nice. It was really fine.
So it's advice to everyone to just try something outside of their wheelhouse.
Yeah, try something outside of your comfort zone. You'd be surprised.
Awesome. So today we are talking about middle neighborhoods. So I'm going to start with just the very generic question of what is a middle neighborhood?
Well, I think a middle neighborhood is varies in its definition and manifestation. Quite simply put, it's the middle of the income spectrum of neighborhoods. In urban policy for the past 50 to 60 years, we've looked at low-income neighborhoods, concentrated neighborhoods, as they relate to high opportunity, high income neighborhoods. But now we're starting to say, let's not just focus on low-income neighborhoods. Let's focus on those working class neighborhoods that are the buffer in most cities between the rich and the poor. Why? Because often in those neighborhoods, you have stable families, stable institutions that, if supported, can keep a city going. And that's what you really want. You want a city that's balanced, that it offers opportunity, and middle neighborhoods that are solid can be the base of a solid city.
So thinking about that, where you talked about the city, people often think of where they live by geography. So I live in the downtown, or I live in an urban core, I live in a suburb, maybe rural areas, but maybe they don't think of it by neighborhood type. And right, why does that also matter in thinking about that middle neighborhoods could be in places irrespective of those geographies?
Well, it's a good question, but I think that downtowns occupy a large space in our cognitive map. And people don't look at bedroom communities, bedroom neighborhoods, because they're taken for granted. Why they're taken for granted, I don't know. But everyone sort of looks at the CBD or areas we have retail shopping. But again, these middle neighborhoods are very, very important and shouldn't be overlooked. When they are overlooked, they often are the bulwark, the forerunner of decay. And that's an important point to make, that you want to get to them before they start to decay. And what does decay mean? It can mean individuals starting to leave and go to the suburbs or first ring suburbs. It could be that these neighborhoods are starting to get starved for investment capital. And so the buildings, the homes start to deteriorate. And that's what you want to prevent. You want to prevent that. It's almost the broken windows theory of crime. You want to get to those neighborhoods very quickly and give them the support they need to be viable.
So these neighborhoods aren't new, right? I mean, middle class, working class families have lived in neighborhoods, right? Very, very long time. Why are we just now starting to talk about middle neighborhoods?
Well, I don't know why, but I would say it has to do with the frustration of urban policy, that we've tried to support concentrated poverty with a range of policy instruments, urban development action grants, community development block grants. We've built community development corporations to the point where they're the major development institutions in the community. We focused in on one end of the spectrum. But in doing that, we've neglected a critical part of the spectrum of city health. And now we're at the cusp of a new generational shift in these neighborhoods. You know, you're right, Molly. These neighborhoods have been around for 60 to 70 years, going back to the dawn of the Industrial Revolution in many cities. And they've grown, they've become strong, they've become viable. But now they're at, I think, a part in the life cycle where they're possibly on the downward slope. And that's why I keep coming back to it. We need to catch them before they really deteriorate. Part of it is the answer to your question is why are we focusing on them is demographic shifts, age cohorts, but the fact remains we have to now focus in on them even more than we have before.
Now, there is a lot of talk right now about the extreme, wedge that is between the affluent and the wealthy versus the low income. Is the middle class or middle neighborhoods, is it at all being affected by the fact that the middle class is supposedly shrinking?
Oh, I think that's a critical part of it. The fact that we have sticky productivity in this country. Wage earnings have not gone up in real terms. I think that's all a factor in the maintenance of the middle class and the fact that middle class residents in these neighborhoods are strapped. They're finding it difficult to maintain a certain lifestyle, and not a gaudy lifestyle, just being able to fix a boiler when the boiler breaks, or replace a roof when a roof needs to be replaced. These are, if you can't do that, then again, the neighborhood starts to deteriorate, and that's what we want to watch.
Okay. So I guess my next question is looking at Northeast Ohio to give people a perspective of maybe some middle neighborhoods in Northeast Ohio. Do we have any up here? And can you recognize any, like what would be a typical middle neighborhood in Northeast Ohio that maybe someone could recognize?
Well, I'm going to ask your partner, because we have a grant from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation to study middle neighborhoods. It's a very important grant, a competitive grant. And it's to study a middle neighborhoods initiative in Cleveland and throughout the former industrial Midwest. And Molly Schnook is on the ground or in the lab studying these. So I would ask her, what are some of the neighborhoods that we are looking at here in Cleveland?
So I think, thank you for mentioning our project. I think that, there are a lot of places throughout Northeast Ohio where there are middle neighborhoods. Looking at Cleveland specifically, you can think of places like Old Brooklyn. I'll mention for folks that there is a National Middle Neighborhoods Initiative, of which Cleveland is a part. And the city of Cleveland now has a middle neighborhood strategy to address some of those communities, but middle neighborhoods aren't just in the city of Cleveland or in the urban core. I would look to some of our first ring suburbs, places in Lakewood, at South Euclid, Parma, that are very much middle neighborhood like, and that's true for other cities in the northeast part of Ohio, as well as the rest of Ohio and other states. They're your communities with, if you think of places for first-time home buyers, you think of, communities that have housing in the range of, maybe 15 to 1900 square feet, your 3-bedroom starter home type of place. Those are really, and they look by housing type different in different communities, but those are really the places that we're looking at.
And I should mention about middle neighborhoods and why they're so important but difficult to help is that most of our public help for neighborhood poverty focuses on just that, neighborhood poverty. So you've got a formula, and the formula says 100% of median income. That's going to knock out middle neighborhoods or middle neighborhood cities such as Lakewood and Old Brooklyn. So what we're trying to do is focus in on defining them, justifying what the needs, and hopefully that will inform public policy that we need to change our formulas about how to help these communities.
I don't know if one has to do with another, but back when we had the housing crisis in 2008, 2009, right when the bubble burst, were middle neighborhoods affected more, do you think, by that? Or were these not the people that were affected by the housing bubble?
I think that these neighborhoods, these middle neighborhoods, were also affected. In Northeast Ohio, we always talk about Slavic Village being the epicenter of the housing crisis. But all of these communities, because many of the communities had debt, the middle neighborhood communities had debt the same way that low-income communities had. It's just another variation of it. So there were significant losses during that time. As much as, say, Slavic Village, no. But when communities are on the margins, or the middle income neighborhoods have families on the margins, you're going to be affected by things such as the financial crisis. Mm-hmm. I don't know if we picked that up in the data, but I bet you 10 months to Sunday it happened.
Yeah, and I think you have to consider that housing is the largest asset and wealth creator for most people in this country outside of the extremely affluent. And when you lose value, as the housing crisis did, especially for places hard hit in Cleveland, you have people who dropped out of the middle class, lost a considerable amount of equity in those properties that they had maybe had for a very long time. And that's actually probably to some degree true now in the pandemic, with employment losses and wage decreases potentially during lockdown that you may see, and also the double-edged sword of a huge spike in property valuations across the country. Again, not just in Cleveland, where the potential is to now lock out homeowners in, some of these desirable neighborhoods, of which middle neighborhoods are some.
I think Molly's exactly right. There's a significant trend going on that hedge funds are buying up properties in choice neighborhoods. When I say choice neighborhoods, we term them middle neighborhoods, and turning them around like the old flipping schemes, fixing them up a little bit and selling them at a higher rate. Well, that now locks out lower middle class communities or lower middle class folks, and you get homogeneous income communities, which is just not good. It's not good for our society.
Yeah. Or you have communities that were traditionally, these middle neighborhood communities with high percentages of homeowners before, and you have hedge funds or investors in these properties creating sort of this rental dynamic in communities that didn't experience it before. And so you're decreasing the rate of home ownership and changing the dynamic of those neighborhoods.
Indeed.
All right. So what else is this research study looking at? So we're looking at defining middle neighborhoods. What's the future of the research project?
Molly,
Well,
yeah.
Well, we hope to be able to identify 5 to 6 case study communities across the country, middle neighborhoods, where we can learn more in depth about the challenges and opportunities facing these neighborhoods, identify some set of policies that other places can use in a toolkit for community development, for stabilization of these neighborhoods, for growth of these communities going forward. And I think also one of the things that was surprising to us in starting this project was that middle neighborhoods are not very solidly or well defined. And so I think overall, the hope is to gain a stronger understanding on the ground of what middle neighborhoods are and what they aren't.
And what's exciting for me is that, and daunting, is that we're actually coming up with measures that are not, they don't exist in the literature currently. And so it's a fine calibration of what is a middle neighborhood. And we hope that we can get it right, but it's going to take time to figure it out.
All right. Anything else to add about middle neighborhoods? I'm excited about them. I'm pretty sure I live in one. I'm pretty sure I live in one, and it is daunting with the housing that's going on, with just at how much I bought my house for just 5-6 years ago versus how much like my neighbors' homes are going for, and how quickly the housing was crazy this summer. Am I just sensing that wrong?
No, it was crazy. And it still is, and it's going to take a minute for it to settle down.
But that just shows that Northeast Ohio is experiencing I wouldn't say it's a boom, but it's a different type of housing market than we've had for the past 10 years. In some respects, we're rebounding. I hope this lasts, but it's good. It's good for Northeast Ohio, and it's good for the city of Cleveland.
And then with the loans in this, is it harder for families in the middle class to get loans at this point? Is that part of the study? Like mortgage?
So access to loan products and mortgages is not part of the core of the study, but it does capture measures of home ownership and where people are getting home loans, especially first time. But you're correct in some ways that it is more difficult in getting the mortgage, not necessarily because people don't qualify for a mortgage, it's the rapid changing dynamics of the housing market and prices and things like all cash offers, the competition that is out there. It's harder for people to find a house and get the appropriate mortgage product for that property versus actually being mortgage qualified and what we would traditionally think of somebody who would get a loan.
All right. Molly, do you have anything else to add?
I think, and I hope you do too, Dean Anglin, that middle neighborhoods are going to be a topic of research and discussion, not just for Cleveland, but more broadly for quite some time. And finding this middle space for cities and communities, whereas we have focused for so long, especially on very vulnerable, very, very poor communities, we've neglected to look at middle places.
Well, I concur, Molly. I think public policy really needs to reorient its focus and support, because this is where the majority of the neighborhoods are. It doesn't mean that we're abandoning the poor. It's just saying that we're spreading the needed support to make these viable, sustainable communities. And if we do that, I think on the front end, we can prevent the massive investment when decay takes whole charge. So that's why I really believe in the power of middle neighborhoods.
I think they provide an aspirational place to say, where are you moving people in poverty to, right? What does that next step look like?
Yes.
And it's moving into home ownership. It's moving into middle neighborhoods and middle places. I think we often talk about, this idea of ending poverty, but what does that look like, or where does that look like? And middle neighborhoods can be that aspirational place for stabilization.
And one thing that I think we ought to mention, oftentimes we think of middle neighborhoods in strictly racial terms. They're white working class, but that's not true. There are Black working class communities across the Midwest that they're in that middle neighborhood category, and they really need to be looked at, because they're the sort of bulwark against racialized poverty that is spreading from the inner city to the first string suburbs. So that's another reason that we need to look at middle neighborhoods, but to really put a racial lens on it to make sure that we're not missing anything.
Yeah, and there are Latino middle neighborhoods in places across this country, Asian and Indigenous neighborhoods that all are deserving of looking at, seeing what policies are working in those places and where people can share ideas of how to overcome challenges.
Yes, indeed.
All right. So those are some great final thoughts, I think, on middle neighborhoods and where we can go from here. It's been great. Thanks, you guys, for joining us on this podcast. I'm going to go ahead and end it here. And everybody, please check out the rest of the podcast. Again, go back to the very first one and learn more about our dean and more about our policy. And I look forward to this being published in the future, because this is a work in progress, right? This is a work in progress right now. So stay tuned for the results of this one. And maybe we'll have to come back and do an update on what we found from this research study.
Maybe we'll be back.
Thank you, Kristen.
Thanks, you guys.